Welcome to Tales from the Waystone, a King Killer Chronicle reread podcast.
We are your hosts, Will and Phoenix. Let's get into it.
Welcome to Tales from the Waystone, Season 2, Episode 63. That's not how any of this works, where we will be looking at Chapter 127 of The Wise Man's Fear through the lens of Absolute Cringe.
All right. For those that are new here, and boy howdy did you choose an episode to start on, each week we'll be examining a section of The Wise Man's Fear through a chosen lens and figuring out what we can take from the text to apply to our real lives. We will also take some time to focus on a phronemos of the week or every other week. And then we will also share a recommended thing of the week. We will finally wrap things up with 7 words from the book and 7 words from our own lives. Before we begin, let's get some disclaimers out of the way. First of all, we are in no way affiliated with Patrick Rothfuss or his publisher, Daw Books. Second, we are assuming that you have read The Name of the Wind, The Wise Man's Fear, probably The Narrow Road Between Desires, maybe The Lightning Tree, maybe not, but there will be spoilers. There just will. Anywho, a word to our community. Please be kind to yourselves, one another, and the creators of the worlds that we love exploring. We will start things off with the one and only chapter that we are covering today. And,
It's one we've been dreading for a while.
I'm not holding back.
Yeah, this is,
The dumbest thing in this book.
It reads like one of the sophists that Plato inserts into the Socratic dialogues to serve as the rhetorical punching bag for Socrates.
This is just stupid. This is so dumb. In a society that is portrayed as otherwise incredibly intelligent, thoughtful, like aware of their bodies, all of this stuff, unless they are a different
Forking.
species, then that's not how any of this works.
Hence the title. And what's also really frustrating is that this is coming from a character who we are set up to be sympathetic to. Like, this is not just some random dummy that Kvothe has to fight, right? This is someone who's ostensibly someone he respects and admires.
So he can't really, quote, can't have a conversation that explains. This frustrates me to no end. On top of that, the series to this point hasn't portrayed women in the best possible way, but I had hope that this chapter makes Pentha into a complete and utter
Forking
moron.
Yeah. And it's also kind of hard to tell if Pentha here represents the view of the Adem at large, or if this is just something that she herself has been led to believe.
Right. Okay. So, due to the absolute travesty that is sex education in the US, I can sorta understand how an adult human woman, or at least someone who was born with the bits that could create a child inside of them, I can sort of understand how all the mechanics wouldn't necessarily align in your head where you know all the bits and bobs and stuff if you're not well educated. But this society also prizes education.
Yeah, and ostensibly they have good medical skills and things like that because they're needing to get patched up all the time, so they need to have people who understand how the human physiology works.
I just... Also, there was way too much use of the word ripen.
Yeah, there is very much straight man writes straight woman dialogue in this one.
Presumably straight woman.
Fair.
We don't know who everybody is
Forking. This is true. But yeah, it's like you kind of figure, like, is Pentha this naive? And I want to give the Adem the benefit of the doubt and not say that Pentha in this case speaks for all of them, because like Surely Cheyenne knows better. Surely Vachette knows better.
I think we're going to be proven that no, Vachette does not know better, because I think that there's bits where Vachette backs Pentha's play. I just hate it.
Yeah, it's a special kind of, oh boy.
So, I am going to preface this a little bit. Yes, it's nearly the beginning of Pride Month. And if I'm not mistaken, it will be Pride Month, June. By the time that this comes out, I am part of the LGBTQIA plus community, agender, asexual, but I'm also very sex positive for other people. And I don't mind like the sexual content in it. I don't mind the frank discussions and the wanting to make sure that everything's pleasurable for everybody and whatnot. I do mind a little bit the everyone kind of playing jokes on the naive girl.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I also have an issue with the discussion of whether or not Kvothe has any sexually transmitted infections or diseases.
Yeah, I thought that was like, these are just things that people have, and by making it into something that I would kill someone who gave me this or whatever.
It is a naive way to look at medical issues. First of all, if you haven't seen it yet, go look up the episode of Adam Ruins Everything on herpes, because it's legit hilarious. And Murph and Emily are legit like so funny in it. And it goes along with the oh my god cringe, especially if you had your sex ed in the 90s. So funny.
Like us.
Yes. And on top of that, well, yeah, it's a medical thing, issue, whatever, something that you have to deal with. It's been built up so much to feel like everything is just morally horrible about anyone that has it. When you realize, though, how many people have it, it's like, okay, so we're making everybody feel morally just like a failure over having an infection that a lot of people have and that isn't a huge deal. Yeah, you need to get it checked out, and you should probably be visiting a doctor and making sure that everything is feeling all right. But it's not worth being so judgy over.
Yeah, because the thing about the impulse to name and shame and judge is that it doesn't get people to improve their behavior. It gets them to be convinced that they need to hide the problem.
Right.
And let's also be real here. They don't have tests, let's put it this way, where you have something like, for instance, herpes, where it can lie dormant for years without an outbreak or anything. So there's no way to know who actually infected someone, especially if they've had multiple partners, which we know the ADEM do.
Regularly. But on top of that, the symptoms could be a lot of things.
Right.
So, yeah, Kvothe being all of 17, 16, whatever years old, and saying, I studied at the best medical establishment in the entirety of everything. Of course I know what an STI looks like.
Yeah, you know what one looks like, but you don't necessarily know that it's always going to present.
So there's a whole lot of this that it feels judgy and gross, and I hate it.
When conversations around public health become moralistic things, it has a way of flattening the discussions and the concerns that people have. And it starts taking it from just a fact of life that people deal with into a moral failing on the people who are dealing with it. And that just isn't a good feeling, and it does not lead to actual good outcomes. So effectively, when you are punishing people for revealing that they have this infection, what you have done is told them, don't reveal that I have this infection, because they can't not get the infection. Like, the rain falls on the righteous and the wicked alike. You can do everything right and still get infected with diseases. That is just a fact of life. And by turning getting infected into a moral problem, then all you've done is just created a sense of shame, which does not correct the behavior. It just creates the desire to hide it. And this is a case of punishing the behavior you want to see. You are not punishing people for getting sick. You are punishing them for revealing that they got sick. And so they are not going to not get sick. They're just going to not reveal.
Right. And so you've got things that are less severe, but then you are also punishing people for potentially revealing life-threatening diseases, illnesses, what have you. And so if there's something akin to like HIV or AIDS, where that
Sure.
really needs to get taken care of by a doctor, like there's no innovation, there's no finding a cure, there's no finding ways to mitigate the symptoms or make it safer for people to engage in the behaviors that most humans do.
Yeah, like doctors can't research it because patients won't come forward, and there's no way to develop effective study of what's actually going on. Yeah, I think really what it comes down to is that when you're talking about issues of public health, if you're going to take a moralizing stance, it really has to be around creating a culture of safety, which means that people feel safe revealing that they have any kind of medical issue. And that can be anything, whether it involves physical disability, disease, mental disability, learning disability, what have you, mental illness. You have to make it safe for people to share their whole selves and be vulnerable about that and seek help for it. If you shame people for it, if you punish people for it, all you're doing is driving people into the shadows and alienating them from the rest of the community unnecessarily, and making the problems with public health even worse.
We just need to start at the beginning.
Let's remember, because there is actually something that I do find interesting that isn't necessarily, again, a case of a Socratic dummy.
All right. We start off at the end of Quoth's stone trial, and Tempe essentially just comes up and shakes him and goes, "What in the nine hells were you thinking?"
Yeah, you shouldn't have given up your sword. You didn't have to. Nobody expected you to.
But she did. Yeah, because she's like 5 times the warrior that you are, the fighter that you are. She can get away with not having her sword because she doesn't need it. You need it.
And Quoth gives his own opinions on this, where he was like, well, if I had won and she'd given up the sword, everyone would have said that it was only because I had the sword and she didn't. And if I didn't, well, it would look even worse for me if I lost, because I had given myself an advantage and still failed. And there is actually an interesting conversation that ensues between Cheyenne and Tempe. Cheyenne doesn't really formally come down on one side or the other, but she does say that there is merit to Quoth's way of thinking. Tempe says that the only objective is victory, and Cheyenne says that's not always the case. And what I think I am seeing here is the difference between tactics and strategy. So if Quoth had kept his sword, for instance, that could have potentially escalated matters. The number of ways that he could have been injured, maimed, or worse, killed, go up through the roof. Like, there is no shortage of ways that it could have made things absolutely worse. And like Quoth kind of intimates at the end of the last chapter, sometimes just surviving a thing is victory in its own right. And by fighting unarmed, he was able to effectively, gracefully end things before it could escalate to the point where he was seriously injured.
Now I'm going to say this. There is a world in which Quoth could have won in the dumbest way possible. And the reason I say this is because I have beaten people who are actually good at fighting games, and I am not. I have accidentally won Soul Calibur against someone who was actually really good, who was just like, I didn't expect that they would just keep kicking.
Yeah. I mean, he could basically be the equivalent of the noob who goes into a Street Fighter match with E Honda and just does the 100-hand punch the whole time. It's aggravating. It's not very fun. Maybe you can win, but it also is not infallible.
I'd say for the person, who accidentally wins, it's also not terribly fun because it's not earned.
No.
It's also not fun to be the person who's like, but I didn't think you'd be that bad at it, so I fought you like someone who wasn't that bad at it.
Right. Like, there are ways to defeat those strategies. I didn't realize I'd have to employ those.
Strategy.
Tactics, let's put it more accurately. Or button mashing.
Exactly. Button mashing is my specialty when it comes to fighting games. I'm sorry.
Anyway, while the two of them quibble, Pentha leads Kvothe out away from all of the hubbub.
She did say something that I think is very smart, which makes the rest of this chapter so much more frustrating. She's like, do you really need me to take care of any wounds or anything? Nothing? No? Didn't think so. However, after I have lost a fight, I rarely wish to have people tell me how I lost it.
Yeah, let's put it this way. A blameless post-mortem is a very useful practice to put yourself into, where you can go back and review what happened, look at the tape, so to speak.
See what went well, see what didn't.
But you need to give yourself some time.
Right after you made a big fork up is not the right time to go over the big fork up.
Yeah, like after you take an L like that, you need to get some time to reset, have some distance where you can view things a little more objectively, where your wounds have had a chance to heal, in this case, sometimes even literal and figurative. And it gives you a chance to think over things and come up with ideas and solutions. Sometimes after that, you just need to get away and not analyze and obsess, because that just leads you to living in that failure. Life goes on. So yes, Pentha is correct in this regard.
She leads Kvothe off to a clearing full of flower petals, because apparently Vachette told her that there are rituals around sex. I get the impression that the Adem do not value foreplay.
Yeah, and I also kind of get the sense that it is possible that through a game of telephone, Vachette said one thing and Pentha misunderstood it as something else.
It's also possible that Vachette had the wrong understanding in the first place.
There's multiple places where this could have gone wrong.
It also very easily could be that Vachette was playing a joke.
We do know that Vachette is not without a sense of humor.
And also that if it weren't for the fact that the two of them have had sex, their relationship, Vachette and Kvothe, would feel like a sibling relationship.
And I think there's a little bit of a sibling relationship between Vachette and Pentha.
I get the impression a little bit that there is a sibling relationship between nearly all the Adem.
Yeah, which lends the whole thing a slightly incestuous vibe.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they have a gene pool like Dalmatians.
This is why I seriously think that there will be a little redheaded Adem somewhere.
Right. I mean, they don't understand genetics. They don't understand basic human reproductive systems.
No.
Yeah.
No. We don't know which one or if both.
Well, and then Kvothe talks about this herb that he takes.
We haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry. We haven't even gotten into the man mothers yet.
No, we haven't. There's a little back and forth, volley back and forth about misunderstandings of culture, playing the overly serious just to make somebody like kind of be disgusted for a few seconds and embarrassed. And I don't find any of this nice. I don't find any of this fun. I tend to hate feeling embarrassed because it leads to an anxiety attack for me. And so having someone go, but wait, you don't drink your own urine, as though they were trying to be like serious for a second before just breaking into laughter, I hate that. Hate it beyond belief. Just not my style. But that's a thing. And then we've just got that conversation about whether or not Kvothe has an STI and the absolute overreaction of if someone gave me something, I would kill them or ostracize them or whatever and make them take years to go get cleaned up, whatever. There's also, in general, don't use the word clean to mean not infected by any diseases. There's such a stigma, and I hate it. And it doesn't matter if you have anything or not. You can be kind to people who have any sort of communicable disease.
Yeah.
Like, I know this isn't just about things like sexually transmitted diseases or infections, because I know that at the beginning of COVID, at the very least, probably still now, like there's a moral component about, well, you didn't do everything right, so that's how you got COVID. I haven't gotten COVID because I'm a shut-in, because I don't really go places, and I go places with masks on if I do. I've only recently, in the last few months, not worn my mask at guitar practice or not worn my mask to go into a sparsely populated store. Like, we go to hardware stores all the time, and I'm still a little bit about not wearing a mask, but sometimes I just say F it. You know, I'll still wear a mask on an airplane, or I'll still wear it if I'm going to a populated grocery store. But it's not a moral failing on those that did catch it. I have friends that are teachers. They can't really not go to school, and they can't really not go maskless if they want to communicate well. I mean, think about service workers. They don't have a job if they're not at their job. They don't have the privilege of being able to do it isolated. And yeah, there's precautions you can take, but there's also just a limit to how effective those precautions can be.
And we also are living in an age when there are also effective mitigations post-infection. And we have other protections in place that help to mitigate damage with infection, between vaccines and antiviral medications.
But it comes back down to if you don't want to admit that you have it, or you don't even want to test for it, then the public good is not being served. And also just the good of the people that you interact with just on a general daily basis. If you're just feeling like it's a moral failing on your part, you're not going to tell everyone, hey, I tested positive for it.
Meanwhile, if it is more important for people who are uninfected to be able to sit on their high horse in judgment of the people that have it than it is for them to make sure that there are adequate treatments and contact tracing and plans in place in case something happens, then that high horse is going to get pretty lonely pretty fast.
Like, you can't expect people to have to work in jobs where they are people facing, like, and then get mad that they're in locations with people. You can't do that. And also, they can't live without an income. So, like, are you going to advocate for a universal basic income? Obviously not. The last 4 years have shown us that that doesn't happen. You know, like, I just hate the moral association of, like, illness means bad person, because it doesn't.
Yeah, you can do everything right and still lose. So no point in trying to judge folk over that.
But also, even if you don't do everything, quote, right, like, sometimes you can't.
Right.
Sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
It's not something that I'm going to sit in judgment over unless you specifically went to a COVID party or some stupid thing like that where you purposefully infected yourself. That's different. That's a moral judgment there that I can make because you did a stupid. But if you did everything that you could within reason, you know, same thing, like sexually transmitted infections. If you wear a condom, if you do your due diligence, if you do your best to let people make their own decisions ahead of time. You know, just give them a heads up. Hey, I've got this thing. Still okay? Cool. You know, if we make it less scary to be upfront and honest, then people will be more likely to be upfront and honest. Anyway, I'm going to say that we have said our piece on that. However,
Yeah.
it's just leading up to So sexy time, sexy time, sexy time, more sexy time. Pentha nearly draining Kvothe dry, except Vachette would be angry with her if he was absolutely useless the next day. There is an implication, possibly for fighting, possibly for
Forking.
and it could be like this beginning part does explain a little bit. I think the word anger might be the wrong word in my mind. I think for me, the word passion might make more sense when talking about this zest for life almost.
The generative urge.
But if we're going to put one word on it.
Yeah, I would say passion could work. Could also be libido.
But it describes more than just sexual urges.
Well, libido is also more than just sexual urges.
Is it the desire to also like do your own hobbies?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, libido is the desire to make things. To basically pour your energy into doing something. So yeah, anger is perhaps a limited word, and that could be chalked up to a language barrier issue, because after all, a passionate argument and an angry argument sound pretty much the same. And you could see someone who didn't speak the language
Confusing the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like the sort of thing that might happen there.
So she says it's a desire, it's a making, it's a wanting of life. All things that live have anger. And so I do think it's that zest for life, that passion for creation.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's a good conversation, and one thing I do want to focus in on. You can tell a man who has been keeping all of his anger to himself, all of his passions to himself. It goes sour in him. It turns against itself and drives him into breaking rather than making. And I think that that is describing also like depression and anxiety.
Yeah, I think when you don't feel safe expressing the things that you're passionate about, it has a way of curdling. It can manifest as self-destruction and also destructive behavior towards other people as well. If it makes you bitter because you don't feel like you're allowed to be yourself, if you don't feel like you're allowed to actually find joy in things, or you don't allow yourself to find joy in things, you start to resent people who do.
I'd say it also creates a self-loathing for someone who is a creative who doesn't allow themselves or has lost their passion.
Yeah, I think, as someone who deals with self-loathing a lot, it can be very difficult. You want to like things, but you are convinced that if you are allowing yourself to be passionate, to be involved in everything, to really be present in life, that you're somehow failing and you hate yourself for it. I mean, it really is true that for most people, our worst enemy is really ourselves. Like, no one can hurt us as badly as we do.
I'm not exactly sure how to move on from that, so I'm just going to do a hard left turn.
Okay.
After a little break, the narration says, "The moon was in the sky and had been watching us for some time through the window, though I doubt we showed her anything she hadn't seen before." Again, that interesting connection to the moon, that personification of the moon, the implication that the moon is a character, that the moon is a specific character like Denna or Ari. Though I think Ari is more sun.
I think one of the things that I took from this is also, as much as people love to personify the moon, it's foolish to think that the moon gives a fork. Like, the moon is an astronomical body. It's been around for a long time. It'll be around for a long time after we're dead.
That's a cheery note. Kvothe asks the question that leads us into the thing that we have been railing against this entire episode. What use does a woman have for anger or passion that a man does not? We teach, we give names. That's interesting because Kvothe also gives names or finds names or calls names. We track the days and tend to the smooth turning of things. So they're managers. We plant, we make babies, many things. And the conversation turns idiotic. There is a just fundamental misunderstanding of how a body works.
Yeah.
And how biology works and how physiology works. And like, I can't say this enough. It takes smart, intelligent, educated people that we have been building up, the society that we have been lauding, that we have been like, it's a matriarchal society that doesn't just resort to being BDSM sex slaves.
Right.
And it feels up to this point like, okay, we're doing things right. And then...
man mothers.
Right. And the thought that they can't figure out that sex leads to children. And Kvothe even saying, like, don't babies look like their fathers? And Penthe just going, but babies all look like old men. As they get older...
right?
You look just like your dad.
Yeah.
Like, you see the two of you together, you know you're related.
Yep. You can also tell my brother and sister are also related. You can definitely see the family resemblance in all of us.
But specifically like your dad.
Yeah.
Right? Like, your aunts look very much, especially one of them looks very much like your grandpa.
Yeah.
Like, there is no possible way that no Adam children grow up to look like their fathers.
Right. And I mean, like I say, this gene pool is very shallow.
Right.
So granted, they're all going to look pretty much the same.
They're going to look similar, but you're still going to have some traits that are differentiating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's very... While we're also on the topic of public health, you recognize that with this, they're going to be much more susceptible to genetic defects. They're going to be much more susceptible to diseases in general.
Because of all the cousin
forking. Yeah. Yeah, there's just...
So I do believe very strongly that the gene pool is enhanced and strengthened and broadened by the fact that all of the people go off and have their time outside of a Demre, right? Like, because they have a fundamental misunderstanding of how children happen, I don't think that that's possible. Like, I don't think that everyone's just, Or, again, they're not human.
Right.
But just, this is frustratingly dumb.
Yeah. Also, I gotta ask this one other little bit here. Like, Kvothe mentions, like, I've got this special herb that I chew on every day and it prevents me from impregnating people. And I'm just sitting here like, wait, this is the first we're hearing about this, Kvothe. How long have you been doing this? You're someone who has been telling us about every obsessive little detail of your life for the past, well, technically for as far as Chronicler is concerned, a day.
Okay, I gotta also say one other thing about this. If he has been chewing on this, how big of a supply does he have? Because if the Adam do not know that that sperm make baby inside person with egg,
right?
The
fork?
Where does this stuff come from?
And we haven't heard him talk about buying any of this or foraging for any of this or any of that, right? And not only that, it's like, okay, dude, you had your sexual awakening all of a month ago.
2, because he's been in Herrick for a month.
All right. All of 2 months ago.
Right. But at the same time, like, what did Felurian teach you this? Because I don't think she needs you to do that. Did Lassie teach you this? Like, did some other girl on the road teach you this? Are they lying to you? How many little redheads are there that are about the same age? What the hell?
It feels like a crazy retcon.
It really does. Also, I gotta say that the only other possibility that I can think of about the way that they choose to have children or not, if the women or AFAB people that choose to have children are choosing to stop drinking a specific tea, if they're like taking something, eating something, using some other sort of birth control by accident, and then they just decide that they want to have a child so they stop using it. Correlation. People, seriously. Also, I know when this was written, I know like there wasn't a big acknowledgement of the fact that trans and non-binary people who have the equipment to carry children exist, and very binary gender discussions about this all.
Yeah. Point being, all of this seems really dumb. The thing that I came away from it with is the reminder that pure logic doesn't actually get you to truth. Like, logic and truth are two separate things. You can make a completely false argument using nothing but valid logic. And pure logic oftentimes is difficult when you're dealing with probabilistic things, which conception is fundamentally a probabilistic act.
Right. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I know that it's a fantasy story and they're not going to go into the nuances of fertility and the difficulty that some people do face with fertility. But come on. Like, we didn't need to make them stupid.
Yeah. Like I say, this is the case of one of the idiot sophists that Socrates is always having to argue with in a Platonic dialogue.
So, at the end of this conversation, Pentha, again, absolute cringe, says, "It must be hard to be a man. A woman knows she is part of the world. You are an empty branch. You know that when you die, you will leave nothing of any import behind." Ugh.
Yeah, like
Ugh.
it's this idea that in trying to empower women, you have to denigrate men.
There are so many instances of this, right? Like where in order to make the people that you want to be lifted up seem even more lifted up, you have to dig a trench for the opposite of them to live in. And I see this happen in a lot of empowering narratives for women. And I hate it because it's not egalitarian, it's not equitable. It's in order to make this woman feel like she is actually of any worth, we have to make men seem worthless. And one of the best, worst, whatever examples of this that I'd seen really was the movie Brave from Disney, Pixar, whatever, where in order to make the female characters seem intelligent and wise and whatever, they made all the male characters just seem like absolute doofuses, like they were incapable, and I hate it.
I think, generally speaking, the empowering narratives that I find most enjoyable are the ones where it's everyone gets to be competent.
Because you do have the flip side, which is Trinity Syndrome, where you have a fully capable person who happens to not be a man teach the man how to do the thing that they are already good at, and then the man becomes way better.
Right.
Lego Movie, anyone?
Yeah.
The Matrix, anyone? Hence the name?
Yeah.
But yeah, at the end, she's basically placating him. And it's like, you're just saying all that to make me feel better, aren't you? Except Kvothe is actually right.
And he's being gaslit by this girl. Actually, no, that's not gaslighting. Because she genuinely believes this shit, apparently.
It's like someone giving you horse dewormer to get rid of a viral infection.
And they genuinely think that it will help. And like, no matter how much you try and go in and explain complex subjects like this, they don't want to accept it because
bleach and sunlight kill it.
yeah.
Can we get that inside your body?
Yeah.
Your 8th grade science education doesn't cut it. Blah. Anyway, I think I'm done.
Yeah, me too.
And somehow I have to find a Phronimo, so I'm picking Cheyenne.
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's talk about Cheyenne.
Like, there isn't much. She's not there for very long. But literally, the part of this that makes her the Phronimos is the part where she is essentially saying, Quoth, you're not wrong, but neither is Tempe. There are multiple routes to success. One way is not necessarily the right way, and one way is not necessarily the wrong way. They can take different amounts of time and different forms, but also winning isn't always the successful outcome. Wise words. I like her. She's very smart. She's probably not going to ignore that genetics and physiology are a thing, but we don't know. And I don't want to, because if she disappoints me like that, I take back all of the Phronimoses for every single person in the ADEM society at all.
I refuse to accept that they're a monolithic society. I'm going to say that maybe Pentha's an outlier in this regard.
She's just wrong.
There are people in our society who are just wrong. We know this happens all the time. And yeah, you'll get dummies in every society, and maybe in this one particular area, Pentha's a dummy. I'm just going to have to accept that.
I just wish that she hadn't been portrayed that way. Anyway, we're done with that. Go ahead and recommend something.
All right. So my thing of the week is going to be a series on Dropout, which you probably have heard us talk about before as our favorite streaming service. In this case, it is Very Important People.
Oh my goodness, yes. We haven't recommended this yet?
We have not.
Wow.
So Very Important People is originally based off of an old College Humor series from way back in the day. And the basic premise of it is that each week they take an improv comedian and basically blindfold them and then put on a surprise makeup routine full of prosthetics and costuming, and they give them a complete makeover. And then from there, they give the comedian a chance to see how they look and come up with a character on the spot, and then do a talk show interview.
And Vic Michaelis is the interviewer, and they are just fantastic because they are great at being the straight person. And we find ourselves quoting things from all of the episodes just throughout our normal day-to-day. And so there are two that I would recommend looking up: the Deep Blue Ink animated versions on YouTube, and they are Tommy Shrigley and Pig Number 2.
Even better, watch the original.
If they're not available for free and you don't have Dropout, these are good substitutes, but they're more like addendums. They're more like, if you've already seen it, you get the joke, and then you can watch that. But I know that these appear on things like YouTube and on TikTok and whatnot for free, where you don't just have to watch clips, but like the actual episodes are fantastic. And I believe they actually earned it's a streamy, I think.
It got a streamy, and it is apparently up for consideration for Emmy nomination as well.
Which they really I would love it so much. That and Game Changer both.
Yeah. Well, and so Very Important People is sometimes weird, sometimes not strictly funny, ha. It's just, I have to think now, because they don't always just go for the biggest laugh. Sometimes they go for what is the strangest, most absurd thing here that is going to make me question reality.
You're talking about Brendan's episode, and you're also talking about Brian David Gilbert's episode.
Yeah. Both very entertaining, very thought-provoking, and fun, and very weird.
And then Zach Oyama's was just fantastic. And that one we quote all the time.
Isn't that better?
Isn't that better?
Don't you feel better? And I'm not going to say any more just because I don't want to spoil it. I want you to be able to experience the joy of Tommy Shrigley for yourself. But yeah, very important people is a consistent laugh. The entire season is out on Dropout. It is probably the best bang for your buck as streaming services go. It's $6 a month.
Don't pay for it on your phone. Pay for it on the website. Seriously, they get more money. Do not give Apple the 30% of the cut when it comes to subscribing to Dropout. Give it to Dropout on their website.
It's a good value. There is hours and hours of content there as well.
So I'm going to say my favorite episodes were Zach Oyama, Brian David Gilbert, Allie Beardsley, Brennan Lee Mulligan, Izzy Rowland. Just so very good.
Oh, yeah.
All of them so good.
It's going to be a good episode when they get Vic to break. Vic does not break easily. So when they do, it's usually for something that is truly mind-bendingly hilarious.
Absolutely. Great shout.
And with that, let's go ahead and talk about our 7 words.
All right. The book had a lot in this one little tiny chapter, and most of them are pretty good. She flashed me a small secret smile. Victory is not always needed to succeed. What do you mean by anger then? But hoping does not make it true. And the one that I will choose because it's fun and not just because Quoth was trying to explain genetics through an animal that isn't a human. Kittens have little to do with this. Out of context, in context is just a great sentence.
I agree. Good pick.
Thank you.
So I have words from life, and I have that juice is not worth the squeeze.
And why are you picking that?
Because I said it earlier tonight, and it was one I could think of.
What was it in reference to?
So oftentimes when you're trying to accomplish something, it gets to a point where you run into diminishing returns for your efforts. And while you could spend a lot of effort trying to make something perfect instead of good enough, at a certain point, you hit a level where the amount of improvement that you get for each hour of work or each ounce of effort or whatever that you put into it drops dramatically to the point where you could probably be spending all of that time and energy on things that are actually moving things forward and providing a greater improvement than trying to just get that last little bit of that one little part.
So right now we are installing a floating vinyl plank flooring in the room that we record in, and it goes into my craft area. There's one little part where 2 of the boards came apart ever so slightly, and it was the maybe 3rd row in, and we have done so much more since then. It's still flat, everything's good, it's not going to buckle, there's no way that it's going to separate entirely. It just is a little bit further apart than it should be. It's not in there perfectly. And you know what? In order to get to it, I would have to undo 2 full days worth of work.
Yeah.
That is the epitome of the juice is not worth the squeeze.
Yeah. Prioritize your efforts around things that are going to actually improve things. And yeah, you can get a lot more improvement on moving forward than trying to go back and undo 2 days worth of work.
Also, I'd have to undo the baseboards that I already put back on.
And caulked and nailed, and yeah.
It's just not worth it.
Not one little bit. So with that, I'd like to thank you for potting with me.
Thank you for potting with me.
And thanks for listening to Tales from the Waystone. Join us next time on Tales from the Waystone as we discuss chapters 128 and 129 of The Wise Man's Fear through the lens of Back on Track.
We would like to thank our friend Shawnee Jang for our theme music.
And many thanks to Patrick Rothfuss for creating a world that we've enjoyed exploring.
Except for this chapter.
Yeah.
Audio production and editing and social media coordination, courtesy of me, Phoenix McCullough.
and writing and project management courtesy of me, Will McCullough.
If you would like to help support us and have the means to do so, please consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page, patreon.com/waystonepod. I apologize to our one very patient and considerate patron who is signed up for the Sandman pods. We're going to do the second half of book 6 for our summer solstice pod because we have not had time or energy at the same time to do the pod and edit and all the other stuff in between. But it's coming up, and we will do it. It's on the schedule. I swear. And for everybody else, if you are interested at all in it, it is up on the Patreon. And with that, here's to one more day above the roses.
To one more day above the roses.
Ding!
Ding.
Complete and utter
Forking.
moron.
An utter fucking moron.
You just said
Forking.
again.
Sorry. An utter forking moron. You just said forking again.
Fair enough, and I might leave that in the edit.